I was elbow deep in a load calculation when my phone buzzed on the workbench. I almost ignored it. We were 3 days from submitting structural drawings for a commercial build in Dayton, and my project manager had already flagged 2 discrepancies in the foundation specs. But I saw my wife's name on the screen, and something I still can't explain what made me pick up. Daniel. Her voice was flat. Not angry, not warm. Flat in a way that takes practice. Hey, I'm in the middle of something. Can I call you back in? I got the settlement money today. I put my pencil down. My wife had been in a legal dispute with her former employer for nearly 2 years. A wrongful termination case that her attorney had told us repeatedly could go either way. We'd stopped counting on it. We'd stopped talking about it. It had become like a lottery ticket we'd forgotten we bought. How much? I asked. There was a pause. And in that pause, something shifted. I felt it before she said a word. 1.8 million. After fees. I leaned back in my chair. I should have said that's incredible. Or I can't believe it. Or we should go out tonight. The words were right there. But something in her tone had already closed a door I didn't know was open. Daniel, she said again. I need you to come home early today. We need to talk. I told her I'd be there by 5:30. I drove home thinking about everything that money could mean. Pay off the mortgage. Finally take that trip to Portugal. My wife had mentioned 3 years ago and never mentioned again. Maybe expand the firm. I'd been running a small structural engineering consultancy out of a rented office in Westerville for 11 years, just me and 2 junior engineers and a part-time admin. We were comfortable. Not wealthy, but stable. The kind of stable that feels permanent until it isn't. My wife was sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in. Not cooking, not on her phone. Just sitting, with a manila envelope in front of her and both hands flat on the table like she was studying herself. She was 47. We'd been married 19 years. I met her when she was a junior accountant at a firm downtown, and I was just starting out, taking any project that came my way. We built everything together. Or so I believed. Sit down, she said. I sat. I've been doing a lot of thinking, she began. About where I am, about where I want to go. I watched her. Her eyes didn't quite meet mine. This money changes things for me. I have options now that I didn't have before. And I think, she stopped, pressed her lips together. I think I've been unhappy for a long time, Daniel, and I don't want to keep pretending otherwise. The kitchen felt very quiet. Unhappy, I repeated. With us, with this. She gestured at the air between us. I feel like I've been stuck, like I outgrew this a long time ago, and just didn't have the means to do anything about it. I asked her what she meant by this. I kept my voice steady. I'd spent 19 years being the steady one. She slid the manila envelope across the table. I had my attorney draw these up last week. I'd like you to review them and sign. I opened the envelope. Divorce papers, already filled out. My name, her name, our address. The date on the attorney's letterhead was from 8 days ago. 8 days ago, I had driven her to a dinner with her college roommate. 8 days ago, I had picked up her dry cleaning. 8 days ago, I had been her husband, and she had been planning this. I set the papers down carefully. I'm not signing anything tonight, I said. Her jaw tightened. Daniel, please don't make this difficult. The settlement is mine. It's from my case, my employment. It doesn't factor into marital assets at all. The house is the main thing we need to sort out. I'd like you to find somewhere else to stay while we work through the details. I think it's cleaner that way. You want me to leave my house. It can be yours in the settlement. I don't want it. I'm going to buy something else. I just need some space while the process moves forward. I looked at her for a long time. She looked back, and for a moment I saw something in her face that wasn't quite certainty. But it passed. I'll be staying in my house, I said. Tonight, and until a judge tells me otherwise. I got up from the table, poured myself a glass of water, and called my brother. My brother was a family law attorney in Columbus. I'd always joked that I hoped I'd never need his professional services. He picked up on the second ring, and I stepped out onto the back porch and told him everything in about 4 minutes. He was quiet for a moment when I finished. Don't sign anything, he said. Don't move out voluntarily. And tomorrow morning, before you do anything else, you go to your bank and you check every account. Why the accounts? Because people who file divorce papers 8 days before telling their spouse have usually been preparing longer than 8 days. I didn't sleep well that night. My wife slept in the guest room without discussion, as if the arrangement had already been decided. I lay in the dark staring at the ceiling and tried to locate the exact moment things had changed, the way you probe a tooth with your tongue trying to find where it hurts. The next morning, I was at the bank when it opened. Our joint checking account held about $4,200. It should have held closer to $31,000. That was our operating buffer. The amount we kept liquid for mortgage, utilities, the quarterly payments I made for the firm's liability insurance. The savings account that we'd built over 7 years, methodically $100 a month, was down to $900. I sat across from the branch manager and asked for a transaction history going back 18 months. The withdrawals were methodical, never more than $4,500 at a time. A threshold I later learned is often used to avoid triggering automatic bank review flags. They began 14 months ago. Sometimes twice a month, sometimes once. Always transferred to an account I didn't recognize. Over 14 months, my wife had moved $67,400 out of our shared accounts. I drove to my brother's office and put the printouts on his desk without saying anything. He looked at them for a long time. "Okay," he said. "We're not treating this like a standard dissolution anymore." I retained him that afternoon. He filed a motion to freeze the remaining marital assets within 48 hours, which prevented my wife from liquidating anything else while the case was pending. He also sent a formal letter to her attorney noting the discrepancies in the account history and requesting documentation of where the funds had been transferred. Her attorney's response arrived 4 days later. The letter claimed the transfers were for personal development expenses, therapy, career coaching, educational programs, and that my wife had kept records. My brother read it and said, "That's a story. Let's see if the records hold up." They didn't. My wife's attorney produced receipts totaling roughly $14,000. The remaining $53,000 had no paper trail. During the deposition that followed 3 weeks later, my wife said she had paid for services in cash and no longer had documentation. My brother asked her to name the providers. She named 3. 2 didn't exist. One was a wellness company that had been dissolved 18 months ago, before a single transfer was made. I want to be clear about something. I did not feel triumphant sitting in that conference room. I felt tired and sad and like I was watching a stranger explain herself using a language I didn't speak. I had loved this woman for 2 decades. I had thought she loved me. Whatever this was, it had been happening in a part of her life I hadn't been permitted to see. In the evenings during those weeks, I drove home to a house that felt like a waiting room. My wife and I passed each other in the hallway and spoke only when necessary. She was courteous and distant in the way as someone who has already moved on in their mind and is simply waiting for the physical world to catch up. My son called from Pittsburgh during this period. He was 24, working in logistics, the kind of steady young man who calls his parents every Sunday without being reminded. I hadn't told him what was happening. He asked how things were, and I said, "Fine." And he said, "Dad, in the particular way that means I know that's not true," and I told him. He was quiet for a long time. "Did you know?" I asked. "Did she say anything to you?" "No," he said. But he stopped. "Then, about 8 months ago, she asked me if I ever thought about you guys being separate. Like hypothetically. I thought she was asking about retirement plans or something. I didn't." His voice tightened. "I should have asked you." "It's not yours to carry," I told him. "It was never yours to carry." My daughter was 21, a junior at Ohio State. She called 2 days after my son. Her call was different. She was upset in the way of someone who has already had another conversation first. "Mom told me you're being difficult about the house," she said. "She said you're dragging it out on purpose." I asked her what else her mother had told her. That she was unhappy for a long time, and you never noticed. That she tried to tell you and you just... She stopped. "I don't know, Dad. I'm hearing 2 different things." I told her I understood. I told her I wasn't going to ask her to choose sides, that she should take her time, that I loved her. After I hung up, I sat in my truck in the firm's parking lot for about 15 minutes, not doing anything. Then I went inside and finished the load calculations for the Dayton project, because the work still needed to be done. My wife's attorney made an initial settlement offer 6 weeks after she had filed. The offer proposed that my wife retain the full $1.8 million settlement, classified as separate property, that we split the equity in the house evenly, and that I received no claim on her other accounts. My brother looked at it and said, "This is an opening bid, not a proposal." His counter included several items her attorney had not anticipated. The first was the $67,400 in undocumented withdrawals, reframed as dissipation of marital assets, a legal concept that, in Ohio, allows a court to factor in one spouse's deliberate depletion of shared property when dividing what remains. The second was 11 years of financial records for my business, which showed that I had consistently covered the larger share of our household expenses during the years my wife was building her career, then navigating her wrongful termination case. The mortgage, the property taxes, my son's undergraduate tuition. The numbers were specific and documented and hard to argue with. Her attorney asked for more time. My brother said we'd see them in court. The mediation happened on a Thursday in February in a conference room on the 14th floor of a building downtown. My wife sat across the table and looked out the window for most of it. Her attorney spoke. My brother spoke. The mediator asked clarifying questions. At one point, my wife and I were left alone in the room for about 10 minutes while the attorneys conferred outside, which I think neither of us had been prepared for. She said, "I didn't want it to be like this." I thought about several possible responses. I said, "What did you want it to be like?" She didn't answer. She kept looking at the window. "Sandra," I said. It was the first time I'd used her name in weeks. "What happened?" "I'm not asking for the lawyers. I'm asking because I genuinely don't know." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I think I stopped wanting the same things a long time ago." And the settlement made it possible to stop pretending. "What things did you want that you didn't have?" She looked at me then. For a moment, she looked like the person I had married, which was worse somehow. "I don't know," she said quietly. I think I thought the money would make it clearer, but it didn't. The attorneys came back in before she could say anything else. The final agreement took 6 more weeks to reach. My wife retained her settlement in full. The house was appraised and the equity divided, with my share slightly larger to account for the documented dissipation finding. I kept full ownership of my firm, which her attorney had briefly argued had appreciated in value during the marriage, and should be partially considered marital property. A claim my brother dismantled with 4 years of tax returns, showing that the firm's growth had been entirely self-funded. The undocumented $53,400 was treated as dissipation. My wife received less from the house equity as a result. I walked out of the final signing on a Tuesday afternoon in March. It was cold, and there were thin clouds across the sky. The kind of day that can't decide whether it's ending winter or beginning spring. I sat in my car and thought about the fact that I was now at 51, living alone in a house I'd bought with a woman I'd spent most of my adult life with, and that I had no reliable map for what came next. My brother called an hour later. "You did okay," he said. "I know. I mean it. A lot of people in your situation sign things they shouldn't sign, give up assets they didn't need to. You didn't." I told him I had him to thank for that. "You had you to thank for that. You had you to thank for that," he said. "You kept your head. That's not nothing." My daughter called that evening. Her voice was different, more careful, like someone walking on unsteady ground. "I talked to Uncle Mike," she said. "My brother. He explained some things. You didn't need to do that." "Yes, I did." A pause. "Dad, I'm really sorry. I was hearing one side and I made assumptions. I should have asked you first." I told her it was okay, that it was a hard position to be in, and I understood, and that I didn't want her to feel like she had to choose, now or ever. "I know," she said, "but I also need to be honest. And honestly, I've been thinking about a lot of things over the past few months, about what I actually saw growing up. And..." Her voice wavered. "You were always there, Dad. You were always the one who showed up." I didn't say anything for a moment. I was staring at a spot on the kitchen wall. "That means a lot to me," I finally said. My son came home the following weekend. We drove out to a diner on the east side of Columbus that we used to go to when he was in high school, sat in the same corner booth, ordered the same things. We talked for 3 hours. About the case, about his job, about the Dayton project that had come in better than expected. At the end, he reached across the table and put his hand on my arm and said, "I just need you to know we're good, you and me. Whatever happens with anything else, we're good. I don't have a perfect ending to offer. I know that some people reading this want me to say I'm thriving, that the settlement money I received allowed me to expand the firm and everything is better than it was before. Some of that is true. I hired a third engineer in April. We landed the contract for a mid-sized school district renovation that I'm proud of. But I also still drive past the turnoff for the house sometimes. We sold it in May, split the proceeds, and feel something that doesn't have a clean name. Not grief exactly. More like the particular ache of realizing that a long chapter of your life was not quite the story you thought you were living. What I know is this. I did not sign papers I hadn't read. I did not move out of my house because someone told me to. I did not panic, and I did not retaliate. And I did not stop showing up for my children, even when one of them was angry at me for reasons that weren't entirely fair. I called my brother. I checked the accounts. I kept going to work. That's not wisdom I plan to acquire at 51, but it's the kind that stays with you. If you're in something like this right now, if someone has handed you papers and told you how it's going to go and assumed you'll just agree, I want you to hear this clearly. You have more options than they're letting you believe. Get your own counsel. Check your own accounts. Don't sign anything on a Tuesday night because someone put a manila envelope on a kitchen table and waited. The rest you figure out as you go.